All right, the time is 4:30 and we will call the Board of Commissioners meeting for scheduled PUD to order for May 28th, 2024, and ask that you join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so at this time, I would be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 6. So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, consent agenda is adopted. So at this time, we're going to move item 12 under new business up, and that is the SkagitNet resolution number 24-10 concerning banking and amending the operating agreement. And I think Sarah from the port will be joining us.
Thank you, Commissioners. Always nice to see you.
You too.
Very easy business today.
We have a resolution of SkagitNet, which is changing the banking designation from the port's CFO to the highest ranking finance official at the port. So SkagitNet has a bank account at Banner Bank. We have authorities granted to myself as the SkagitNet manager and our highest ranking financial official. So we are broadening that to make it a little bit more durable. We're in change a little bit with our finance position at the port. So this will be durable for the long term. Nothing else changes. So I'm looking for approval of this SkagitNet resolution 24.
24-10.
I move to approve SkagitNet resolution number 24-10 concerning banking and amending operating agreement.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
All right, that was easy enough.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. So this time, if you're a member of the audience wishing to offer public comment, please step to the podium at this time. If you're on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function. Good evening.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My name is Devere Bunky, and I'm here to represent Bethlehem Lutheran Church in Cedar Woolley. We recently experienced a water leak in a pipe. We were notified and we contacted and paid for the company to come and identify where the leak was. We then dug 5 feet down to reach the leak, then paid for the plumber to come and repair the leak. We've received a $2,000 water bill, which is twice our normal bill. Then received a $3,000 bill, which is 3 times our normal bill. We have paid the $2,000 bill. We are a church with a small membership and a small budget. To have to now pay a bill 3 times our normal bill is a real stretch in our budget. Our nonprofit church houses Family Promise, a nonprofit that houses homeless families in our community, providing them with a roof over their heads rather than sleeping in cars, tents, or broken down motorhomes. The homeless families are provided meals, showers, and training to get their lives back on track and move back into our community. Our former 4-bedroom parsonage also houses those homeless families. Our nonprofit church also helps traumatized children in our community by providing local police, firefighters, and schools with quilts that are made and given to those children placed in such challenging circumstances to aid in their comfort. Our church also provides space for AA meetings. I do see in your August 2nd, 2023 agenda under your water policy manual updates under section 3.6 that consideration is given to residential customers, including multifamily dwellings in 2 units, with leaks that were repaired within 30 days, with a water bill 2 times the average for the same billing period over the past 3 years, and that adjustments are limited to $1,000. Our nonprofit church is located in a residential neighborhood. Are we to be prevented from some financial assistance with our triple our normal water bill because the PUD classifies us as commercial? We are not a commercial business. We cannot raise rates on customers to help cover this. The $1,000 financial help that's possible would really help us in keeping our homeless families housed so that they don't have to be out on the street and would hardly make a dent in the PUD's budget. We request that you consider helping us in adjustment to our $3,000 water bill. We do appreciate General Manager George Sidhu in responding to our initial contact and providing information. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak and provide you the information we feel is pertinent to our request.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else looking to offer comment this evening? All right, seeing none, we will move on to George with General Manager's reports.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Update on the water rights transfer authorizations of the Department of Ecology. So they have been approved by Department of Ecology. So we got, I think I forwarded emails to the board last week. So we got the authorizations from Ecology. Now we need to clean up our end in order to authorize the transfers from us to the irrigators. And so we're having a little bit of a hiccup with supply chain issues on the meter that we want to use to meter the irrigators' pumps. So we put that in our agreement with each of them. So we have everybody agreed to either use the irrigators' meters in the meantime or use the pumping records that we've been doing in the past. We talked to Ecology about it. We talked to our partners about it. Everybody's okay that there's a metering supply issue. So we're going to use the methods that we've used in the past just to make sure that we can keep moving forward. So that's good. Once we finalize that method of collecting the data and we receive the funds for the admin fee, then we're going to authorize the use of the water rights. We're lucky, I guess. If you want to call what's happening outside lucky. They're not in dire need of the water, but we expect everything to, to be in place this week or next week. So that's good. We got a nice email from Department of Ecology just thanking us again for being forward thinking and making sure this is all taken care of before we get to the summer dry season. So that's all really nice. Another piece of good news. So the state capital budget has been signed and we received $300,000 as a line item. And for us, it's specifically for the Olson Creek water line relocation, which we are doing because of the culvert replacement requirements. So our efforts down in Olympia are still coming through and paying dividends. So that's nice.
That's 39th district, right?
Yes. Yep. We are having a meeting on June 4th. So I've organized a meeting with the PD's managers, supervisors, and we're including the foreman as well. And we're going to review some of our strategic goals, strategies, and tactics. I want to develop some new focus areas for the next 1 to 2 years. So something that'll happen after these meetings in June, we're going to have one with the large group and then one with just the managers to try and boil down what some of those focus areas are going to be. And then I'll report back to the board and we'll update our implementation plan that we did as part of the strategic plan a couple of years ago. I'll update you on how we did on the first setup, where we're at now, and then we'll have some new areas to focus on over the next 1 to 2 years. So we're getting a number of people included in that to make sure that we are covering the areas in need. And so one thing that we're doing to feed us information is that we conducted the staff survey that we originally did back in 2022 as part of the strategic planning. We listed a bunch of strengths and categories and asked staff to identify them as strengths or weaknesses. And then we asked them to identify priorities. So we updated that survey, got 56 responses, I think, out of 80, which is a little bit less than last time, but still pretty good. And so we're going to use the information that we get from there, including all the comments, to help us with the information to use in our meetings next month in June. So that'll be good. Update on the building. Mike Benton sends an update every week. And if you get up close to the building, you can see that the masons started washing the exterior of the brick. And so it washes away that whitish look that it has on it. And it looks really nice when it was cleaned up. You sent me a picture of it. It looks really good. The drywall installation is moved to the second floor now. He's pretty much done with the first floor. And so he thinks we'll see painters and other subcontractors starting to work on the lower floor coming up in June. So progress is still continuing. And we continue to gain ground at Judy Reservoir. We still have 3 pumps running. And I assume maybe we'll see some water from the creeks with all this rain coming up here, possibly. So we're gaining a lot of ground. If you see by the chart that's in there, I think we're above where we were last year, which is quite a bit earlier than last year, so that's good. And that's all that I have, unless there's any questions.
Any questions of George? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Looks like Alistair is up with an IT department update.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it as always. So for tonight's update, we'll just briefly touch on our new ticketing system that we're in the process of implementing. Give you a brief update on some cybersecurity matters, and then our updating, refreshing of Kayenta. So the new ticket system, we're currently using Spiceworks. We're going to move away to a product called Fresh Service. The beauty of this particular system now is it's got a really great usable user portal where we're able to put out messages and inform everybody within the PUD if we're running into any issues. This is going to be extremely helpful as we go through the Kayenta upgrade. We're able to post FAQs and other knowledge-based articles that currently in Spiceworks we don't have the ability to present. We've also got the ability to actually do real change management, which is very important as part of our cybersecurity and resiliency, keeping all of our systems updated and logged. We have an area for contract management. So all the software contracts, as they get ready to become due, we've got information to be able to notify us, and we can stay on top of those things. Nick's been working real hard, and we're hoping to get this implemented by the 1st of July. And we'll present that out to everybody. If you take a look at this particular picture here, that took place, I think, around November of last year. That's an HMI that exists at a water treatment facility in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. And it's Unitronics. We don't have any of that in our area, but this was hacked specifically because Unitronics are made in Israel. And so this was part of the Iranians hacking group that were able to access this, and they defaced that HMI there. So a prime example of what can happen if they get into your system, which is why we're taking all the steps that we're taking to try and prevent something like that from happening. Also in Muleshoe, Texas, they had a Russian hacking group that got into their system and were able to spill their water tank there. They were able to take that offline, put it into manual operations, and they notified security. Also during that same time, there were 2 other small Texas towns that the same group tried to get into their systems. One, they were able to prevent them from the firewall. The other small city, they took all their systems offline and went into manual operation. So things are starting to, well, I'm not saying specifically escalate, but to the point where EPA has started to take particular notice of everything that's going on, and they're starting to step up some of their enforcement efforts as part of the Safe Water Drinking Act. They've said that they've noticed a very alarming note in their inspections that 70% of those that they've inspected have not met the basic requirements of having a risk and resilience assessment as well as an emergency response plan. And so they're getting to be real serious about stepping up those particular inspections and citing people for those violations. I think we're in a good place. We're coming towards the tail end of our 5 years from the risk and resilience assessment in our emergency response plans. Jay has specifically been talking about brushing those off, taking a look at them and getting those rehashed. I think the last time we spoke, mentioned House Resolution 7922. Don't know if it's gonna make its way to actually getting signed, but it still exists. We have spoken to Waputa about it. They are trying to clarify what their position is gonna be. I've been fortunate enough to speak to some of the folks at EPA through some trainings and some other activities that we've been working with them on to talk about this bill. And we're actually even offering ourselves up to some of our legislators as this gets crafted and as it moves along, if it moves along through the process. HR 7922 gives the EPA, it's going to create a new organization, Water Risk and Resiliency Organization, that's going to focus on creating some standards and implementing cybersecurity throughout the water sector in the U.S. It's kind of sort of, they're taking a look at what the energy sector has done and the regulations that they put in place there. And I think this is kind of their first step toward mimicking some of that on the water side, because they really haven't had much specific regulation other than the Safe Water Drinking Act and mandating the risk and resiliency assessments. So we're going to try and be as helpful as we possibly can towards crafting whatever that is going to be. And then finally, Vivian's been working real hard to get us ready to get Kayenta upgraded. We're looking at a July 29th go live date. And a lot of that work is going to affect specifically the finance area. The one thing that's going to affect everybody is our Connect employee, which is going to replace the ESS module in Kayenta now, where everybody puts in their timesheets, their leave requests. So this is a very significant aspect of the upgrade. We're going to start training June 17th. We're going to run that for 2 weeks, focusing on the supervisors and everybody who approves them. We're going to be working with staff to introduce them to the new tool and how they'll enter in leave and time. And then after that 2-week training period, we will actually run parallel systems where we're going to ask everybody to enter their time and leave in both the new Connect employee module as well as the ESS, so that we can make sure that data is running as it should be, payroll gets processed as it should be. And then again, once we go live on the 29th, everybody should be using it. That's it. Any questions?
Questions of Alistair?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so with that, we will move on to item number 9 under old business. And that is the Mount Vernon High School Energy Recovery Demonstration Project. Mark is going to join us.
Good afternoon. So we brought this to the commission kind of as information at the prior meeting. In this packet, not much has changed. We've finalized some of the contract documents, filled in the project specific information for the Department of Commerce contract. Pete had a chance to look over it. They don't really take too many changes in their contract, Department of Commerce does. So most of the language is, well, it is pretty much what they gave us. There was also the question about the interlocal and the amount on the additional. We limited that to annually, so $1,000 or $2,000 annually.
This
So
is on
that,
damages.
what's that?
This was on the damages.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if it needs repair, we'll just go out and do it up to $2,000 per year. If it's more than that, we're gonna call them and, they'll help with the funding of that. So just so that we don't get one, $2,000 hit in March and then another one in October and a third one in December. So
Yeah.
that was, we made that modification. I think that's it. We've sent out the easy form on the historical archaeological part of this, and we are waiting for a determination from the Department of Commerce, and then we will be ready to go. So we're looking for approval. I don't know if you have any follow-up questions about the project or.
I just had one. When you and I had spoke last, we suspected that we were going to get additional from in pipe for, I saw that the tax was still referred in this memo. I didn't know if we secured full.
Yeah, so,
in pipe.
so we have kind of, it's in pipe has said that the IRA and the IRS credits are up to the amount that they're up to 40% of what we spend. But the part that we need is less than that. So they're not going to ask that they're going to make us whole. The language, they understand the language to read that they will cover that, they will give us a credit for that portion of the project that is the shortfall, up to 40%. We have a letter from InPipe, basically kind of a little rider agreement that says if that doesn't come through, then they will reduce their contract by that amount.
Got it. Perfect. Just that clarification.
Okay, so any other questions? We'd be looking for authorizing the general manager to sign the interlocal with the Mount Vernon School Districts
So moved.
And second.
and all the other agreements that go along with this, because there's quite a few. So all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so with that, we will move on to item 10, financial hardship assistance application. This is discussion item.
Do you want me to introduce it, Brian? And then, okay,
Yes, go ahead.
I will do that. Just to bring everybody up to speed and kind of set some perspective on what we put into the meeting packet. So back in 2022 was when we had made an adjustment to our leak policy. And it was revised to be more consistent with other water utilities in our region. And so we now have a policy where we exclude anything beyond what is just the main service line to the main structure on the property. The policy is enforced by our customer service reps, and for them, it's clear, explainable, and it's consistent. Each one of them enforces it consistently. In recent months, we've also here at our meetings talked multiple times about the concept of a bill adjustment due to hardship, where an adjustment can be made for someone who doesn't qualify for the leak adjustment. So Brian and I have been talking about this quite a bit, and so we've introduced the concept of a financial hardship grant. Before we get into the details of that, I think it's just important to understand it's a concept for discussion, not necessarily a recommendation. It's something to start this conversation because I think we've had trouble with kind of just trying to figure out where it should go. So we put some of this down and we're hoping to have a good conversation about it. We've had a lot of high dollar water bills, one, as was explained earlier, that don't qualify for an adjustment. And I think everybody agrees those are unfortunate. And with the amount of conversation we've had in our meetings about them, we just think there's some ideas that we wanted to present to talk about this further. So couple of important factors. So the concept of this grant is also rooted in the fact that we want to try and limit how much work our staff is being asked to do to help assess and qualify and try and figure all these out. You know, if you're dealing with income statements and tax stubs and, you know, all of that, that's a lot of work. So we're proposing that we use a concept of provide all the relevant information and self-certify things that you supply. So that's one idea. Also, we think just having it, if we go this way, having a yes or no. I think trying to have a sliding scale might be hard to score, qualify, but again, that's just Brian and I thinking a yes or no might be easier. There's subjectivity involved in all of this, which we've talked about. And so we haven't specifically answered in this application the question of how exactly would you qualify? It's just a request for information. So that's something to think about and something that we should discuss because it then has to be evaluated. Lastly, once it's evaluated, where does the decision come from? Because I think if we make it a policy, make something a policy, there's still the request to move it up to here, which that's written into our water policy manual that everybody could come here and explain their circumstances. So is that a decision that the board is making? It's something we should discuss. You know, are you making that decision in public, or is that a decision that's passed down and it's administrative again? Because I think we still might end up in the same position, even if it's administrative. So just think about that as well. Whatever the process we make, we want to have whatever decision we make about the process, we're looking for something consistent, I guess. You know, it's hard to look at one customer and then the next customer. How do you be consistent in your decisions? And that's just something you need to think about. Brian's got a lot of information in detail about how we used to enforce the policy. Sharon's here too. You know, some of the questions we've got this year, even just in the last 2 weeks, really. So if there's data that you want or information that you want, we can get more, but I think it's time we have this conversation. So this is a suggestion and we're interested, you know, Brian can speak to, he can add his.
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of it. You know, we started down one path with trying to get just really clear criteria. And if you didn't make it, you know, that would just be the decision tree that would, you know, spit out a magic answer. And then I started back and got all the way through it and realized each one of these is unique and it doesn't fit into any one category. And they are all unique. And at the end of the day, it's either, you know, this one would, for whatever reason, deserve some sort of hardship grant or help or assistance, and this one wouldn't. So I ended up with this application in hopes of asking, you know, open-ended questions to explain or to give the opportunity for them to explain why they would deserve some extra consideration after it doesn't qualify for our policy. But before that, you know, going back to our policy change, we probably had one of the most liberal policy for leak adjustments out of all the industry. And so we did a survey, we got input from other PUDs, you know, but basically anything, every 12 months you're eligible for a leak adjustment or anything that was just high consumption. And that included leaving your faucets on, not turning off your hoses at night, a leaky toilet valve, anything that just was unusually large would qualify. And so we went through that, compared it to other utilities, and came up with our policy that is
very definable now and currently, and is successful. I'll tell you, we went from 328 leaks in 2020 down to 82 leak adjustments in 2023. So it does work with what we did. It doesn't make everybody completely satisfied or happy, but it does do what we were looking for, which is defining it and limiting it to that responsibility of the district from the homeowner. And we originally, made that the meter box, and then we extended it to the first entry into the dwelling or the building on the property. And the main reason was for that is that we own and maintain that equipment. We know what's there. We spec it out. We have to go replace it. We inspect it. We do all of that. Whereas after it leaves the meter box, the homeowner can do what they do, or the previous homeowner, the plumber, and we have a lot of systems that have branches that go off them for irrigation or other buildings, and we don't know what they are. So that's why we determined that that should be the point of demarcation, and it's like, again, it's easily definable, and it works from limiting our exposure as a district. We do need to remember that the district is just paid by ratepayers. So if one person gets a credit on their water bill or gets a hardship case, it means that the other taxpayers or ratepayers are paying it, not taxpayers, sorry. And so it's just a transfer of where that utility or the payments are coming from. So that was part of the consideration for it. So with that, Nick, can you go to the link here, which is the application? And I'm happy to answer questions as we go. So, and we can talk about specifics, but one common theme, I guess, we kept coming back to is should the person making the leak adjustment or high consumption know of the circumstances? So for me, that usually is determined by, is it a renter or an owner? We want the owners of the properties to take responsibilities for their pipe, their prevention, the maintenance. And so that would be one point of interest, I guess, is, how long have they been there? Do they own their house? Are they a renter? Have they contacted the owner? Have they contacted the property management company? So we did put income on there, but we determined that we're not going to do a lot of income verification, but it would be household income, number of people in the household. That might be an important determination. I will challenge that when you have a leak, no one wants to pay that $3,000. No one wants to see that, but there might be certain circumstances where they are more able to pay for that. And if that would be a determining factor for the board or whoever's going to administer it, that would be part of that consideration. Other things that we came up with was, military service, veterans, disabled. We had one with their hard of hearing, so is that a mitigating factor where I can't hear my toilet running? I can't hear the pipes leaking. Is that a consideration factor for us to consider if we're going forward with this? Some of the other things, if you scroll down a little bit, Nick, we did want to add some certainty or effort on the owner or the person that's, making this claim for hardship. And that could be any of the following. These are just examples, so we're open to suggestions if there's others. But, have you talked to other agencies that might be able to give assistance? Did you go to the landlord? Have you filed a homeowner's insurance claim? So some policies will include it, some won't. That's not necessarily the information, but, have you done this? Are you coming to the district for consideration before you've contacted anybody else? We also don't want someone to make a claim on their insurance and get a credit. Not saying that that would happen, but we're trying to protect the district again. And so then at the end of all these questions, we would give them the opportunity. And my thought again was, this would be after you've gone through a leak adjustment already and been either given a $1,000 credit and you thought that you deserved consideration for more, or you were denied that, then you would go to this next step. And that would be submitting all of that information, because that gives us the information that we start with, like how long have you been there? Where was the leak? Pictures, documents, what have you done to fix the leak? All of those are part of this consideration also. And because we also have customers that have high consumption that we can't get them to fix a leak. So we are, caught in the middle sometimes on both ends of that. Luckily, we've reached out to that tenant. And they hopefully are getting their assistance to get that leak fixed. So that's on a good news, but it's taken, several letters and phone calls, and finally Sharon got a hold of that particular customer. And so we hopefully have a resolution to that. So that's a little bit of the extreme on the other side, but we do try to identify. That's the other item. We're not able to identify leaks necessarily prior to your bill. So if you're billed monthly, you get notification after 30 days. If you're billed every other month, you might not get notification for 60 days, but we do give notification. And we went through that process before. The meter crew has flag checks. Our billing clerk also is looking for high consumption. And then the ultimate one is when the customer actually gets a bill and sees that their use is much higher. But we're not able to give real-time data. That's a very expensive AMI proposition, and we're not capable to do that. And finally, we do give indicators that you might have a high consumption, and oftentimes it's not a break, but they're gradual increases. And so we do give notice, and we've had several of those cases where we said, your water looks like you might have an event going on. Have you checked all these things? And we give them a list of things to check. Sometimes that is enough and they are able to find it. Other times it continues on, and it'll take 2 or 3 billings before that leak becomes such an event that they finally, figure out where it is. So that's kind of the spectrum from where we are able to assist and what we've done in the past and what is available currently. And then this would be, I guess, a final iteration if the board chooses to go down this path. I will say it's going to be much harder and time consuming to compile all this, and then we still need to decide how we're going to evaluate them if we go down this path. So, and if it's just a hardship and we say, well, this person it's a real hardship, that can be displaced across just paying their monthly bills too. So we're going down a slippery slope, I'll say it that way. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't or that we should, but it does lead into many other questions and factors that would have to be considered. So any questions, comments?
So if I were to have a leak, what's my first contact that I'd be receiving? Is that, so it goes to the metering crew and either they get notified that there's a higher than usual usage compared to like the last few months. And then it goes to billing, and then is it manually, that information is manually passed down to them, or is it flagged on that account number?
So are you saying the customer is contacting us or we're contacting the customer?
You're contacting the customer.
Okay, so when the meter crew goes out there, they can tell if there's been a leak, which means 24 hours of use, continuous use right at that time. So that's one. If it goes to the next step, it would go to the billing clerk, which is noticing and a comparison from your specific use to prior use in your residence at that time, so that it's comparing apples to apples and not your house to somebody else's house or your house to a different time period. So those are both ways that you would be noticed from us. And we try to investigate them. And then if it's one of the newer regs or the newer meters, we can actually give historical reads, and they go back 6 months, and we can give them data specifically on when when the hose was turned on or when the water was used or when it went off. And so that's very useful too, but not all of our houses currently have that, but they're being replaced. And so that'll be another data point that provides a lot of information. So those are all useful tools after the fact. And then the final one would be if you got a bill and it's, why is my water bill so high? And so we know, then the customer service, so that'd be a customer calling customer service, and they usually go down known items that cause higher consumption. So the weather is the biggest one, but if you have visitors, wash your car, fill your pool, hot tubs, time of year is a big one. So last year we had very dry season, everybody used more water, and we got an awful lot of phone calls, and no one wants to remember today that I washed, my car last week, or my son was home from college and had a hot tub party that we didn't know about. All of those are real events. And we find out after the fact, but we ask all those questions to try to do that. And then we'll send the meter crew out there. And again, they can tell you if the water's continuously running, but if the meter crew goes out today and it's not spinning and showing continuous use, it doesn't mean that you didn't have something that happened, 2 months ago. And that's part of the problem, is we're always dealing with this lag and what happened and what we see today. And we can't. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a high consumption, your toilet wasn't leaking. It just means it's not leaking today, or not showing as a continuous use today.
I like the form, the way it's presented here. What are you guys' thoughts?
My concern is just the final decision and that portion of it being unclear as to what the guiding criteria. I mean, it's very subjective, and that's my biggest concern, is like you said, the policy is very cut and dry. I do have a few questions just in regards to our policy, because you did provide me with the initial water policy manual update back in 2021. That verbiage compared to what we have now versus what we had even before that update. And there was a big change between the initial presented water policy manual update language and what our current is, including the single family residence. The exclusion of anything besides single family residence was added after this as well. And then I think double the usage and a couple other factors were changed from this iteration to that one. So I'm unclear why we went the direction of only residential versus churches, but other nonprofit or city or municipalities or what have you. So I think I'm curious to dig into the policy itself a little bit and just see if there's any massaging there that could prevent some of these events from coming to us. That once every 5 years, really, is it going to take that dollar amount and increase it back 70% to our $140,000? Or is it going to be that 1,000 to every 5 years, maybe not even? So I just think the intent, I don't know, just seems.
I guess I can speak a little bit. I was catching up on some phone calls today, and as to why the change, and it was someone who had called me who I knew, a long time ago, and called me and wanted to know what the change was, because it used to be so easy. If you knew a commissioner, you got your bill wrote off. And I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah, you just whoever you know at the PUD, you can call and they'll just make it go away." And I was like, "How horrifying!"
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and Sharon's getting, people do, they say that, they're like, "Well, it's all who you know, and you can get your," and I said, "Well, that's not, so tell," and now I've got you on the phone, tell me your experience. He said, "After it was explained to me, I understood it, but my going in on the old way is like, I get it that you guys made a change, but under the old way, it was who you knew, and then you got it wrote off, or how they allowed you squeaked, how sad your story, your bill went away." And I said, "Well, what's your understanding of it now?" He's like, "Well, I don't like having to pay my bill, but it seems fair because you're applying it to everybody." And I said, "Well, yeah, that's what we're going for, is that fairness." And he's like, "Well, I still don't like having to pay my bill, but I got my leak fixed." And so to me, it was like, okay, there's a win. There's probably some wins in that we have established that there's a method to the madness, the reason for that change. I think because I hadn't seen it, I hadn't actually heard it firsthand before, that it was like, "Oh, no, it's all who you know," about getting that wrote off. At least in some circles in the community, that was a perception. And I said, well, where'd you hear this? Like, oh, everybody I talked to, I was complaining about my water bill. I said, I'll just call them and I'll write her off. I was like, whoa, okay. So that's one side, and the other is I'm sitting here like this. I guess there's two competing principles. One is that we're probably, I don't say we're the least qualified in terms of day-to-day judgment for these things. But we are justified and elected to make decisions like this, or to create the framework for the judgment, right? I think we would love to just write the algorithm and then it kicks out a solution. But in the interest of often human suffering that goes into malfunctions, we're trying to come up with something that is both enforceable and equally consistent. Yeah, just consistent. Yeah, I think that's, my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if somebody goes through the trouble to fill out the form, obviously it is a hardship form if they're filling out that form, so I mean, I guess if we did go this route, would you want them coming to the meeting to tell their story, or would you prefer that be done by management?
I would, I prefer it at management, not that I don't want to hear from them, because I think that's important. But I don't know that that's necessarily to me, would be a requirement that they come and plead their case before the board, but.
There's still subjectivity in that though, right? Because so you could.
Well, and then I think we would need to have a policy on, it's gonna be reduced by, is it 25%? Is it,
whatever it is, and then so if you push that down to me, like what is my criteria for making a decision? So all the information will come in, we'll get them to answer all these questions, everybody does it differently. Some will provide more than what they need, some maybe not so much, but the amount of information doesn't necessarily speak to how credible it is for a hardship case. So then it still kind of goes back to, well, depends what George thinks.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Do I really want to be put in that position?
No, right, yeah, no, and that's, and I guess the other part would be maybe even on the informing side, because as you said, this is the value transfers occur. We've sold that water. What they did with it on the other side of the meter, we can't speak to, and you can't return it, right? That's the other part. And also that cost has been borne by the rest of the ratepayers. So contrary to the comment that it wouldn't affect the budget of the PUD, these requests are you're asking for another ratepayer to subsidize the malfunction of equipment on your side of the meter. Like that needs to be acknowledged, like accident or otherwise, there's something that's on your side that occurred that you're asking the rest of the ratepayers in the Skagit PUD to pay for. So yes, it's a grant, but we're the grantor as well.
Still have to budget.
It's coming out of the budget.
And I thought that was interesting. I was reading through some of these the other PUDs, how they manage leak adjustments. And one of them was, the lowest, or they had a leak rate, right? One of the lowest. For us, it would be the agricultural rate, right? Or even the ag rate would be lower than the tier 1 by 30 cents or something per 100 cubic feet. But that was one way they addressed it, is that you did only get one adjustment every 5 years, so on, but it was at an adjusted rate. So you're still saying that they were paying for the water, but it was at a decreased rate, which that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. I don't know. As far as the usage conversation goes, and I think it's just some of the things that are exempt from our policy right now is what's causing some of these issues. I mean, irrigation, I understand that irrigation lines, you're going to get a ton of those. Somebody doesn't winterize their irrigation line, there's so much. Yeah. Irrigation is one big mess, but something as simple as exclusionary because they're non-residential versus residential. That I don't quite understand why we have that line in the sand as far as the policy goes.
Yeah.
And
So
then-
if you want, on that one, I think it's, you know, we gotta be careful. Non-residential and commercial are not necessarily the same thing. So we have a difference between the billing cycles, and the billing cycles are every 30 days or every 60 days. And I think that went into part of that thought process there. We also were more concerned with the individual hardship than to a business or to a apartment house. So where we're differentiating between a nonprofit and an apartment house or a commercial, that's a different designation. We just did it at residential and everything else. So it's partly by billing classification, but the logic was based on a 30-day versus a 60-day. And less of a hardship on those entities. It may not hold true against every, you know, category like we're hearing tonight, but it is, that was part of the rationale for it. It wasn't to try to, you know, differentiate. So, and the other designation that we use is, you know, if it's just a triplex or larger is considered non-residential, where duplexes are still residential. So you have usually one owner occupied, not necessarily, but on one side of that meter, and you might have 1 meter or 2 meters, so they're still included in that. But so that's part of the definition. Again, whatever we include, or whatever percentage, or whatever amount, or we don't include irrigation, but we include shops, you're going to have the next event or somebody's event that won't qualify. So they're all considerations is the best way to say it, but there'll always be one that isn't as well as is included.
It's hard to include some piping on private property and not other piping on private property, because then the onus is on us to try and figure out what it is. There's a challenge in that, you know, what we tell our meter readers and our maintenance department and anybody that's going out into the field, our service ends at the meter. Our risk ends at the meter, our, you know, liability ends at the meter. We've extended this to the entrance to the first dwelling, even though we didn't install it. You know, I think about that a lot. Anybody can install plumbing on private property. How much responsibility do we want to take for it? It's not an easy question to answer.
Well, it's to me, I guess there are two cost parallels running in my mind. One is the cost of the water delivered, and then it's almost a double bind, because the cost for staff in resolving one of these is exponentially higher than non-malfunction, right? So the amount of time from the team, customer service, all the way up to George's. And so that's another, I guess the cost of water delivered goes up when malfunctions occur.
They do.
That we have no power over.
And just determining them. We spend a lot of
Yes.
meter and customer service time and effort. So it's not usually one time out there, it's several times. And so that we're trying to always look at it as, you know, we stopped doing the first one where it was just a call out for a meter inspection. It's like, no, they've already done, you know, a call or a bill, something else. So go out there and it has to be more than just, you know, is it an investigation? So, and that's to save one extra trip, and they could be anywhere in the county. So that's there and back for a meter technician to go do another read or gather the data from the reg, or talk to the customer or see if it's still spinning. I mean, that's usually it. We think we found the leak. Can you come back and just tell us if we did? I mean, that's part of it too. So
And just as a comparison, so what do we charge for a turn on or turn off?
or
Like if send a meter tech out? Like there's like a
turn it back.
reconnect,
Well, just,
like get the term wrong.
yeah.
What's the fee I'm thinking of, the one-time fee? The $80 fee, yeah.
Oh, reconnect.
Reconnect.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So-
$80 if you've been turned off for non-payment.
Okay, so and that fee is based on time, an average amount of time for a meter tech to go out there. So roughly, that's what it costs for somebody to go and visit. Oh, it's about $80.
Now, other PUDs charge for that inspection. Or they'll come and if there's not a problem, then you get charged. So if there's a leak, I mean, we could do it. But again, we're kind of adding mitigations or considerations to it, but they all, have a pro and a con to them. So, other PUDs do that to limit how many times they get called out. But I would rather not create a whole bunch of another fee structure that we then have to administer and charge and explain, but.
No, but it's illustrative of my point that there's a high cost.
Yeah.
That goes into this that is not even
It's not factored
related
into any of this.
to the rest of the mishap.
Yeah, the estimates were just, the numbers that were included were just the credited amount for the customer, not the cost of actually administering it. But that's a business cost, and we need to, the customer needs to be confident in our equipment, and we need to make sure that our equipment. But that's again where we ended up stopping and saying we are confident about our equipment and getting the water to that point. Beyond that point, it becomes, much more owner responsibility, or they could do a lot more things to it after that. So. Now, we don't have to, this wasn't a recommendation. We're not asking for a vote. We wanted to discuss and get more input. It's very timely. You've all been included in emails from customers. I think that also led what George and I to this point was, some of it is context. So we see what the customers are turning in for leak adjustments. We hear that side of the story, and we also see what we've done and what's proactive and what's preventable. You've got emails from a number of them that are very large, and we all admit that they are very large. They are certainly not anything that anyone in the room would want to pay for. And then we're to the next category, which are there other mitigating factors? Should there be considerations? And so we wanted to discuss all those tonight. I think it's helpful to compare them. And that's kind of how we ended up with the grant application is that none of the four that we've been talking about recently are the same. Everyone is different. Even tonight's is different. And so that's part of the challenge, but it does give you, they're all maybe the same dollar amount, $5,000 to $8,000. But one is an individual, one is, not, it's a nonprofit. One is military, one is a veteran, one is hard of hearing. One is just an elderly person that couldn't get under their house, but has a house and knows that, they had a leak. All of them are out of the ordinary, and all of them involved, not being in their house. So that includes preventive maintenance, where they did preventive maintenance, but not out in their yard. And then we had a freeze. We are seeing a large number, more than normal number, and there are larger right now, but we also had very severe winter that are all, and I think some of it goes in waves, but they're all for your consideration. I guess that's what I'll say. And then we wanted to get back to you because it's been a month since we talked about it last time. Get your input, thoughts. We can keep going and get data, or we can come back again with
Examples. I don't know if,
Yeah.
like you said, the four most recent ones were all different. Like, you can run them through something like this and think about what you would get as a response. I don't know if that would help. You guys have got the emails though, so you can probably think about each of them.
I think it'd be nice to have them all side by side, just for perspective too, for us. I mean, we get an email every now and again about one, but there's been, I think that'd be like the fifth or sixth one since I've been here, and they're all very, very different. But having them, was it residential? Was it business? Was it nonprofit? Dollar amount? What were the CCFs involved? Because that provides perspective too. I have no idea when I'm looking at our rate structure from, 0 to 300 and 400 to 100 and 101 in excess, where these are lying as far as how much you're getting charged per.
They'll be in the
Unit.
third. They'll be in the third tier.
But that,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the thing is it would be interesting to see the bills comparison and then has that account had an adjustment? Have they come multiple times with having an issue, or is this a one-time thing that was the intent of how the policy is written in general? Which is once every 5 years,
Mhm.
something happened.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think a couple of them got an adjustment prior to us revising our policy and then now it reset.
Um,
At least
other,
mine did.
do we want to ask questions of people in the audience? Um, we're talking about the church, so there was some indication that you had had a leak adjustment before at the church? We don't see that we did a leak adjustment. Was it a residence on the church did you used to have a parsonage or anything, or was it the actual church?
It was pretty much in the same spot. I was on staff at the time. And it was probably 15 years ago.
Oh. Are you in a residential place for your church now?
The church is in a residential district.
Okay. So I think, thank you.
So from the water, from the street to the church is what, 50 feet?
Yeah.
100 feet?
Yeah.
So they've all been in that lawn area.
So, thank you. I think the clarification would just be, I don't, other than that one, I think all of the other ones are new and single requests for consideration. Before we're thinking about more recently that we have, but each one is slightly different. So again, going back 15 years, I can't speak to certainly the history of who you knew way before our time. But that is a concern. It doesn't matter how it was approved and the neighbor knows, or somebody else knows. And that's always part of the explanation that customer service is getting. It's like, well, we did this before, or my neighbor did it, why not me? So again, whenever we change the policy, we gave the reasons and a long lead time, and we're doing it prospectively. So even if you did a leak adjustment 2 years ago before this change, it's from now on, we're going to make a note that this is the adjustment and you're going forward. So we're not preventing anyone retroactively. It's all going forward that we were doing that. I think that's fair for the new policy and our interpretation of where we were defining those. But we did have, not the ones you're talking about, but annual ones where there's just a frequency. And as soon as the 12 months were up, we do have very long driveways and very long water lines in the county. And I think that's part of the reason there's a large number of leak adjustments that have happened and are requested to happen is at least that's part of the reason for that. So geographically, I don't have proof for that, but anecdotally, we've been talking about why there seems to be a lot. So soil condition and long service lines could be part of that. Certainly the weather that we've had has been a factor of that. But we could do it. I can try to answer questions. I think putting them in a grid, at least off the top of my head, it's how I got here was they're all pretty unique, and I don't think any of them would even line up where you would have two in the match of 4 or 6 that we're doing, and that might be fine. I'm just saying that that's part of the thing. Our tier is, it starts and then goes up and then goes back down. And that's why we have not said that we would charge at a lower tier. It's not as relevant as the other PUDs that go up, up, up. And so they always charge down to it. But we could, but we could just pick $2,000 too. And I think all of those are just another way to get to a higher credit or, a charge. I think it's a good, I wrote down tonight, we could give a credit for the amount of repairs that were spent. We could really do anything, but I just caution you that we have to administer it, and we'll be having a lot of these conversations.
Well, I think that we have made progress on this, as painful as it might be, just because word is out that something is different. So we're out of that, what I genuinely think is a horrifying narrative that it depends on who you know in the beauty, you can get your excessive bill waived.
Agreed.
The other is that we have a rule and we have a reason for the rule. And those, as much work as has gone into that, I think that is worked well worth doing. And I think we're also now in the realm of, well, if there's a rule, and any fool can make a rule, but it also, any fool can apply a rule, right? And so if you look at it and say, is it foolish to apply this in this case? And if we're looking for a standard, I mean, yes, it's a little bit bumper sticker, in terms of what a fool applies as a rule, but where is it that here's a standard, and does it exceed it? And if so, how much? I think that's where we're at. In my mind, that's where we're at right now. We have a very defensible rule. It is, in defensible, it means that there's a lot of rationale and thought and, you know, community input and experience that's gone into getting us here. And now the immediate question is, how do we apply it?
By using the full.
I think the rule, and to be able to say as a business, so where the tensions come is, yes, we want to be compassionate. Yes, also, we don't want to transfer the actual cost of an involuntary high consumption event from one ratepayer to another, or from all of the collective ratepayers to another. How do we, and we've looked, there's no one that's, you know, absolutely crack the code, but there are some other PUDs out there that are pretty committed to their program.
Because my feeling is, I'm going back to, if we do use this form, pretty much if you go through the work to fill out that form, that's gonna be your qualification. And from there, I think we would just need to come up with, you know, how much is the reduction?
I think the biggest criteria for me is that it's fixed. I mean, it doesn't matter, like.
Yeah, I don't.
That it cannot be applied if we go this route, no matter what, there has to be proof of repair.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's part of the leak adjustment. The first step is that you have to document that it's been fixed, and oftentimes that's why we wait so long, is that we want to make sure that the next billing cycle comes out, or even two. Unfortunately, it drags the process out, but we do want to make sure that the water goes back to the prior average usage. And if we don't have a data logger there, that's what it takes a whole billing cycle to do that. But that is step one when they do that, and that would be part of this.
So where do we want to leave this? Do we want to then look at each scenario and kind of see how we want to apply it? And I think we need to come up with direction for staff on what this, I keep wanting to say discount, but you know, what the reduction is going to be.
Yeah. I wonder if, and again, it makes it swing wildly between this. It's all subjective to, can you quantify it and make it more clear cut, right? Where it's a point system, where there's three different, you know, one, I don't even know whether maybe it's one or there's two or there's three or I don't know, where depending on how many points is application, you rate the application, there's 7 points. And if it's 7 points, then it's a 25%, you know, reduction. I do like Bernie's point of we do charge different rates for water that's, because it's treated water, but the cost of water delivery for ag or something like that, where we have a specific you know, rate for an involuntary high consumption event. then that.
George didn't
that's how
really
you-
want to, wasn't the message, we really didn't want to get into scoring these.
I think that's gonna be, well, there's more subjectivity involved.
Well, but based on this form, there isn't, right? So if we just.
It's
get the
all
form
yes,
right-
nos.
Yeah, if it's yes,
All
no,
yes,
and there's
nos.
five yeses, then that's tier two, and that means it's a 20% reduction. Or if it's across the board, it's all 10 or whatever it is, then that's a tier three, and because I think that really is the only way that you're gonna get to the quantified subject, the least amount of subjectivity, because we're asking them to self-certify to say all these things are true. Right? If so, then then the reductions are gonna come at the aforementioned calculus. We either write the formula now and apply it, or we're always gonna be coming back to how sad is the song? I mean, without being crass. Unless I'm wrong. And that's happened before, twice today.
What I'd like to do is put the 4 or 5 examples that we have into that matrix, and then have you look at what we're doing. And then I would love to be able to do that. And that's where I started. And then as I filled out that matrix, so here's my devil's advocate. What's income? What's income? What does that mean? So is that a yes or a no because I make $2,000 or I make $8,000? Is it relative to how much the leak was? I mean, so as soon as you do that, I just want you to be prepared that that's kind of where you do. So I'm a veteran, and I'm veteran and retired. Does that count as 2? And yeah, so you got household, and we can do that, and we can gather information. But again, at the end of the day, I mean, maybe mentally you're going to add those up yourself, and then you can come up with it. It's really hard to do event to event and compare them. But
I think if we do it, it has to be published and established in the same way. Here's the rule, here's how we score it. And then and again, I'm hoping to short circuit a bunch of the staff working conversations that go into that.
Yeah.
And a frequently asked question sheet that goes with it to say, here's what we consider income, and we're not gonna ask you for your tax return or your DD 214 if you're a veteran. If you say it, then okay. We're only doing this once every 5 years anyway, so if you wanna make up a sad story to save money, that's on you and your maker, but we're really just trying to figure out how we can efficiently administer a program.
Yeah, I guess I'm still going back to my idea that if they go through the trouble of applying for this,
we take
there's a standard dollar amount or percentage that's just it, then case closed. I mean, if they've,
Fill out the form,
if they go through all the trouble to fill out the
get the
form,
reduction,
they will get the reduction.
a single reduction.
Yeah, once every 5 years. And yeah, I don't think we
Keep it
want
simple.
staff time trying to score these things.
And so-and-so got 50% and I got 30%. And so you're saying being a veteran means more than and it just,
Just be yes, no.
It's a slippery slope.
slippery slope.
I think we may need to reword some of the questions in here. To be able to make the evaluation simpler.
Okay, well, we'll just.
But I am less excited about extending this beyond residential.
That's a different kind of decision point.
And not specific, and just because we have. There's some large accounts that could become.
But if it's a max of $1,000, the max still applies.
Oh, no,
Then, I mean, what is it? That's my point of how the policy is written, where it says a max of $1,000 once every 5 years. Getting back to just the bones of the policy, no matter how large the account is, the max impact is the same across the board. That's why before going down this trail of grant applications and what have you, is like looking at the policy seeing how all these are exempt from the policy and saying, okay, how are other PUDs handling these types of accounts or these situations? Are they truly all saying that they're slashed through it? I mean, because once every 5 years, unless you're gonna set a clock on your phone, I mean, some people may say, I'm gonna apply and maybe something's gonna break and I don't wanna pay my bill, but
And, yeah, no, I agree, but sitting here, I would like to figure, if we were to adopt this, I'd like a financial analysis, to say, hey, we need to a budget for $180,000 a year for this grant. And then we'll vote on it every year that we're gonna put money in the pot to pay for this.
but that goes back to the point that our total dollar amount that we spent out on leak adjustments every year was 100,000, 110. With a very generous leak adjustment policy at the years.
But if
So
we did
2020, 328 adjustments, each average costing $400, $132,000 was the cost. So 2023, that was 2020, 2023, 72, which you said it ended up being 64,000, not 36,000 for 2023.
No, I think 2023 was what is there, 82 leaks for 36,000.
Okay, perfect.
I think it was halfway through the year that we switched, it was an estimated out, but I mean, it's been between $100,000 and $150,000 before the policy was.
Yeah, and so my point being is I'm not of the mindset I want to budget more than having a lenient policy. Does that mean, like, if it's gonna cost us having a super lenient policy where everybody gets to leak adjust once a year is only costing us $100,000, I don't want to budget a grant program for 100 and something.
Well, I see, we just attribute the actual cost, so we're just saying, this is what we're seeing coming, and if we don't spend it, we don't spend it, but if we're gonna have a grant. I think that's, if we're going to spread this cost across, that it would be
I think,
financially responsible to account for. And the other thing is like
Yes.
a high consumption event, right? And this is to say, I would also like to know how many of these do we, just because that's what we spent on it, doesn't mean that was a total risk. There could be 300 out there and people just aren't applying for them. So that we put this out there and then now, boom, every 5 years I can toss out my highest water bill by writing a letter to the commission.
right,
Okay. I mean, there are people who may do that. We just need to account for that. So that we're not surprised. I think I would love to attribute the actual, it's not gonna be an actual cost, but if we say going in based on the last 5 years or whatever it is, we say, okay, here's what we think our risk for a policy like this that we're adopting. If you're to adopt it, to say up to $1,000 for all involuntary high consumption events. Here's what, and we'll vote on it.
I think it's important to talk about those costs because they are very real in time and effort to administer them. What you're seeing is not the total cost because it's only the ones that actually got qualified and approved.
Yeah.
And we know that they're now limited to $1,000 versus unlimited before that. So, and you're right, there's an awful lot that you're never going to hear about, never, because our customer service staff is already doing the very first ones. Most people, it's commercial, it does not apply. That's enough for the very first thing. Nonprofit, that's a different category, I'll just say, but commercial, it's an apartment. It doesn't apply. We don't have any idea where the water went after the meter. There's 10 apartments. It could be any one of those or anywhere on the land. And then, irrigation is the next thing that we do. And so again, you've got what's easily definable and administered and for our staff to do is what we've implemented. It does compare to most of the other PUDs and utilities in the area. There's some differences, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or once, as long as you own the house, all of those are options. The $1,000 is, in the middle of the pack there, but those differences I would say are like the rate. Some people have a rate structure that charging the lowest rate saves them a lot of money, then that is a material change, or that would be a difference. The other local jurisdiction is still much more like us and is very lenient, and they are don't have a very specific policy, at least that's published, and they are more on the, you tell us what happened and we'll see if we can make an adjustment. And I think they recognize the advantage of what we've implemented. So again, there's going to be people that are just excluded that were included before, and that's going to be the case wherever we draw the lines. But I think there's a real benefit for what we've done at the district and its work. Now, if you want to revise that, we've covered a whole spectrum. We've gone from the hardship to very specific things. Well, we could just include other high consumption events, and either of those is doable, but that's kind of different than the hardship case. If we're tweaking the policy, we can go back and just go through the policy on what you would like to change on the policy, but that is a lot easier, to be honest with you, because I think that's still admitted, but we're just now going back with what the prior board decision had made, but that's entirely possible too.
I think first step, looking at the ones that did not fall under the policy, just to evaluate them and have a clearer picture of what we're.
These examples?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think there's merit to that. I think context is good, and comparing them, because you see them once a month or once every couple of months, it's not the same as every day and what we deal with, so that's fine.
Because it could be that most of these situations that end up being hardship cases are simple phrase or something maybe in the policy that could help. Some of them, I don't know, but without seeing them all next to each other.
Okay, yep, that's good. So I would ask then a little bit, I'm gonna be gone, so it'd have to be a month from now. But if you take the application and look at those and kind of vet those, if there's things that aren't there that you want added or that you don't think should be on there, that would certainly be valuable. Because it was just like George and I have had several conversations about it. We keep going around, and that's what we came up with for a check-in with you. But we certainly want your input, and if there's other things that you would ask or want to know, we've all kind of contributed to that so far.
I'm also curious, somebody had made mention to me that for the county, they do have some sort of, I don't know if they call it a hardship application. I haven't looked it up yet, but someone who has a septic system mentioned this to me, that the county, either you have to have your septic evaluated every so many years by certified, or you can get certified, or they have an application for hardship or an application for waivering or having some sort of scholarship type thing or grant type thing where they help to pay for that to happen. So I don't know if that, again, I haven't looked it up personally myself. It was mentioned to me, but if there's a framework already out there being done by the county, I'd be curious to see what it looks like and the context.
Good. Good, that's a good idea. That's kind of, I pulled stuff from foundations and other grants and things just to try to utilize. So that's a good one. I'll look it up.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up is the Public Records Act Resolution Policy and AP&P.
So this is back on the agenda as a follow-up, just because we wanted to touch it twice, and so we gave you all of the documents. We included this. We did not include this in the consent agenda because it has a resolution in that is specific, but none of this has changed. I didn't receive any comments. Shannon didn't receive any comments since the last meeting. So we're just looking for the action for the resolution and the policy.
I move to move forward with these policy adoptions.
Resolution 2305-24.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Okay, that is adopted. Next up, George, are you presenting the item 13?
No,
Mark?
am I? I believe Marcus.
Am I?
SR 20.
Yes, SR 20. I'm not SR 20.
I thought maybe Wendy was going to do it. I wasn't sure.
Mark Semrau's up next, I think, on the water system plan, and he has a short 45-minute presentation. So if you want to amend the agenda, and maybe he could hand out the water systems and we could table that presentation for the next meeting. I mean, he's put preparation into it and would like to get through it. It's not 45 minutes, it's only half.
We should just get through it now.
Okay.
I'm gonna cut it. Even.
We'll trim her down. Yeah.
Trim her down.
Okay.
Why?
That's fine. So this is the SR 20 fish relocation project that we're doing to get out of WashDOT's path of construction on SR 20. We rolled the SR 9 and SR 20 fish passage projects under one project, kind of put them together. This horizontal directional drilling is tough. And I think we've got about a 50% record on it.
It's in the whole thing.
This is not from any lack of information. We have, let's see, there were five cores that WashDOT had conducted. And then there's another 3 cores that we conducted. So there's a total of 8 cores out there that are mostly to depth. I think one of them was right at our depth. And none of them revealed any hard material of the nature that has been encountered. We've had to struggle with some extra time and material to get through what is considered bedrock. And I think depending on where the final project lands, we may look at some post-construction investigation just to, make sure we're at the right spot here and that it is indeed a rock material that they're hitting that was inconsistent with the material that we show in our project geotechnical report. So, well, I think there was some budget information in here. This will this change order will increase the contract amounts over what we have planned in our budget. So I think right now we are projected to have $110,000 balance. And with this, we will go negative $110,000. And I guess the way I don't want to put any money on the table from any other projects right now. What we would like to do is kind of wait till the end of the year or one of the last projects that we award to settle this and see how it comes under the umbrella of our whole capital budget.
We have the grant too that we got from the state.
We do have a grant. Yeah, we have another additional 300,000 from the contract from the state for funding this project. I don't think that this is going to be the only change order on this project.
So that's in addition to the 582, that's another 300 on top of that, yeah.
So the 582 really only applies to the SR 9 project.
Yep.
We're going to see if we can reallocate some of that to the SR 20 as we close it out. The scope change.
All right, so what's your pleasure on the change order?
Well, I move that we authorize the general manager to approve change order 01 with Earthware Solution LLC in the amount of $221,577.14 for additional HDD services of the SR 20 Olson Creek Waterline Relocation Project.
And I second.
Motion and a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
and Mark,
That's what matters.
the last,
This is the focus of the whole meeting.
last item.
Hopefully not.
Draft water system plan presentation.
All right. Just got 2 minutes. I can still say this afternoon. We want to provide you with an update under the comprehensive planning efforts that we've been doing for the 2024 water system plan and provide some of our findings that we've had to date. So we start off with our mission, vision, value statements. I'm skipping really fast. So why do we plan? So it comes out of the WAC. All the requirements. It's for water systems that are more than 1,000 connections. It's for water systems that are expanding. It's for water systems that want to increase the retail service areas. And it's also for water systems that want to be able to design pipeline replacement projects and be exempt from sending those construction drawings down to health to be approved, just to be sent back before we construct. So that's another thing that we want to be able to do, and we have done in the past. So for the Judy system, we meet all these requirements. So we definitely need to be in that planning mode, doing these water system plans. So just the water system plan is very comprehensive. It covers a lot of different things. I'm not going to go over these. You'll see all the things when you start reviewing the plans. You'll see all these things within there. It's very comprehensive, covers a lot of things. Some background information just on water system planning history. We've done a number of water system plans. The most recent ones are 2002, 2007, 2014. Each one of these plans had a 6-year time horizon. But after the 2014 plan was approved, the Department of Ecology did change their planning horizon from 6 years to 10 years. And so what they allowed water systems to do, including ours, was if you wanted to extend that last water system plan out to 10 years, you just had to put together some amendments and things like that. And then we did that in 2020 and extended that out for that 10-year, but that time horizon is now, we've reached that. So now we've prepared the 2024 plan in order to cover the next 10-year planning horizon. Previous challenges for some of these plans that you saw up here was we had rapid expansion, especially in the 1990s. And both the shoulder decades of that as well. We had rapid expansion within the water system. And so that was the primary focus of the water system was, how are we going to expand to accommodate all this extra development that was occurring? Not so much now. We don't see that kind of development that we saw back in the day. So our focus has been kind of changing, and we've been kind of shifting to more asset preservation and replacement of aging infrastructure. So, and then the development process. So we decided to do the water system plan in-house. The last water system plan we did was 2014. We also did in-house. There's some really good reasons for doing that. One is that we were able to capitalize and capture that institutional knowledge that we have in-house. We're able to instill ownership and commitment. A lot of people have been working on the plan with different sections. Just the fact that they're contributing to a subsection gives them ownership to the entire document in a sense. So we like to do that. We like to focus on our needs and desires. An outside consultant doesn't necessarily going to have that perspective if they're going to be preparing the water system plan on our behalf. We want to build this internal planning capability. We want to be able to look at not just this water system planning, but all our projects we want to be effectively planning. And by doing this in-house, we're developing that capability. And also it's cost savings. Obviously, external consultants cost money. By doing it in-house, we can forego some of those costs. These are just some of the programs that we do within this is not comprehensive. These are just some of them. You can see the departments that are responsible for the departments that are responsible for each of these programs. And then these are the staff that have been key in providing information that covers the things that are covered in the water system plan. So you can just see a lot of people have already been involved in the preparation of this water system plan. Some key findings. So now I got really rushed through that. I had a lot more to say, but I didn't. This is where I really want to focus on. Some of our key findings. The water supply industry has a lot of issues that it's dealing with. First one's availability of adequate water supply. A lot of things like population growth, climate variability, and competing demands are impacting water supply. Currently, we're not in that necessarily situation. Thanks to the MOA that was negotiated back in the 1990s as a 50-year plan, it kind of laid out for us our access to available water until 2046. So this is not necessarily an issue for us. It is an issue for a lot of other water utilities. Next one, watershed protection. A lot of, by just protecting your watershed, protecting the cleanliness of your water source, is a big deal, and it's a big problem for a lot of people. Again, here at the PUD, we have put in a lot of effort in the past decades protecting our watersheds in all our systems. And so that we've made lots of headway. And so this is not necessarily a big issue for us to be planning for. So these first two items we're good on for the most part. Next one, replacing aging infrastructure. Mark at the last engineering presentation talked to you about the kind of the pipeline age issues that we have coming up, and that we have this bubble coming up that potentially is a place or a time in the future that we'll have a lot of pipe we'll need to be replacing. So that's obviously an issue we do have. Capital improvement financing, that's everybody has those problems. We do a lot of things out of our rates, but as I get on this presentation, you're going to see that's going to be tougher and tougher. But we do use private public partnerships. We've gone out for bonds. We've used low interest loans. We've also gotten some grants. So we'll look at all those. We are going to try to be as responsible as possible in providing capital improvement financing for what we're proposing. Incorporating new technologies. This is a problem that every corporation, every industry, every utility is going to have to deal with in the coming years, is this onslaught of all this new technology, anywhere from smart meters, data analytics, artificial intelligence, automation. We're going to have to figure out how can we incorporate this technology responsibly within our utilities. Last, public education on the value of water. We need to be able to continually educate our customers as to the value of water that we have. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the forecasting and projections. And I have this axiom that I always kind of remember, is that forecasts and projections are neither right nor wrong, but some are more useful than others. And so I'd kind of like to keep this in mind, because forecasts, you just kind of, you're getting the best data that you have to make projections out in the future. And I have some of these projections in this plan that you're going to see are going out 23, 24 years. So, in 10 years, some of my projections that I propose in this water system plan are going to be judged as to whether they were good or bad, but I'm hoping that, it's not a right or wrong thing, but were they useful or were they not? So just keep this in mind. Let's get into some of these things. So the Office of Financial Management down at the state, they're responsible for doing population projections in all the counties and all the major cities that have to do GMA planning. And they publish these every 5 years. And so this is the, you can see here, the historical population up to 2022. And it's hard to see because the graph is so stretched, but it is definitely leveling out. Our population growth rate is decreasing over time. We're at a projection, and so they provide 3 lines. This one is the median. That's starting off at about a 1%, and then it trails off to about a 0.8% up here. They also give a low range and a high range. So a couple things we've noticed in their projections, and they give projections every 5 years, is that every one of their projections has been overestimating. So population, at least in Skagit County, has grown less than their estimates. And matter of fact, we have they come out in April with new data points. We've got the data point for 2023. It is already, after 1 year, below their median thing. So population growth within Skagit County is decreasing, and that's going to impact us as a utility. Looking at meter growth. So what you see here is some historical data, about 15 years of data. You can see how many meters we have in the system going forward. And then we've made this, it's very linear. This is a little bit of a blip here from the 2009 great financial crisis. A little slowing in development at that point in time, but it quickly kicked up and kept on this trend line here. And so we're able to make this nice little projection. I love these kind of projections. They're so easy to make. And one thing here is that meter growth is almost perfectly correlated with population growth. So we could take those estimates that the OFM makes every year and be able to apply that to some of our financial questions when considering, well, what's our meter growth going to be going forward? And so that's kind of a nice thing to have. Next population. Okay, so this is the production at the Judy Reservoir water treatment plant. And so it's a bit of an eye chart. Let me just kind of walk you through some parts of this. Time or years down here, million gallons per day on this axis. This right here is about 15 years of actual recorded demand at the recorded production at the water treatment plant. And you can see it's kind of level. It's not really growing. And that's, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But we've made some projections, a little bit of an uptrend, but this isn't nearly as much growth as like that meter production rate that you just saw. There is a much more variability in this. It just depends on how hot the summer is, how much rain we had, things like that. People just use different quantities of water different times a year. And so we gave kind of some boundaries. This is the 5 percentile. This is the 95 percentile. So the gap in between is about 90, should be 90%. So theoretically, you should assume that 9 out of 10 future data points should fall between these two lines. If they don't, maybe that's an indication that maybe you have to look back at the data, maybe make some new projections. Okay, up here, these are the peak days. So this is the maximum day once a year. So whatever maximum day you had that year, you plot that point. It's even more variable because it really depends on, well, what was the, what caused that? Was it was the high temperature? Was the high temperature in the 90s? Was it in 105 like we've had for the past couple of summers? So it's really, really more variable even up here. But again, we try to make a projection. This is going out. We put the 5% and the 95 percentile. So again, 90% should fall within these brackets. This top line here, this top red dash line, that is the treatment capacity at the water treatment plant. So what this tells us is we have adequate treatment capacity at our current plant. Going forward for the next foreseeable future, we do not need to plan capacity expansion at our water treatment plant within the Judy system. So that's what this is kind of telling us. So that's good news. Okay, last one, annual consumption. So this is actually the billed water that we receive from all our different meters and things like that. And what you see here is, again, about 15 years of historical data going here, and there is a definite downward trend line. So our customers are consuming less water than they did in the past. And so I'm just contributing this to a lot of different water use efficiency issues that customers are facing. And we're going to get more into that later at a different meeting where we talk specifically about water use efficiency. We have to have a public forum on that, and I'll get much more into this at that point in time. This teal line, this is the forecast that was done in the 2014 water system plan. So I just jump right to my axiom and say, well, maybe that wasn't as useful as we would have liked.
Don't judge people after 10 years, right?
Yeah, we don't want to judge.
Yeah.
This was probably, if you looked at the population projections 10 years ago, this made total sense. So that's why I'm really leery of the population and really almost want to get away from the population. It's, as a measure for doing that. But anyway, we clearly have this decrease. So we've made this projection. It's going to be flat for, the rest of this decade. Looks like it's going to be pretty flat. Then we're kind of thinking, okay, maybe it'll start increasing as, people can always save so much water and then they can't save anymore. Again, wide variability. We've provided some boundaries, 5%, 95%. Again, we could look at this every year, make adjustments if necessary. But what this is telling us is that we are not going to be able to grow our revenues through population growth. because we are paid by consumption, not by the number of people that move in, not by the number of meters that are sold. We get our revenue through consumption. So this was, when I came across this was an eye opener for me. All right, so just some conclusions. The population growth rate is decreasing within Skagit County. Something could change that at some point in the future, in some sort of industry coming in, something like that. But for right now, the population growth rate within Skagit County is decreasing. Historical population forecasts have always overestimated population growth. They've been much more optimistic than what's happening. Some grossly overestimating. So especially in the time frame 10 years ago, they were grossly overestimating. Meter growth rates are highly correlated to population growth. Water use efficiency is impacting consumption. We are definitely seeing that. Some production conclusions, our water production. The Judy Reservoir water treatment plant production is not correlated to population growth. You saw it's just been very consistent over the past 15 years. Hardly any ups or downs, just variability that happens. And second, the water treatment plant capacity has adequate hydraulic and treatment capacity for the foreseeable future. Consumption conclusions. Water use as measured in equivalent residential units is decreasing. We went from, like in the 10-year period leading into this, we went from like 156 to 146 or 145. And so we're seeing this decrease in the amount of water that equivalent residential users are using. So that's going to impact us from a revenue standpoint and from any kind of rate study we have going forward. Meter growth rates may be declining if is in proportion to population growth declines. If that population continues to decline going forward, we could have meter sales decreasing as well. And population growth does not equate consumption growth. I've kind of covered that. And consumption has some elasticity. So that's when consumption has no elasticity, if you set your rates and say, we need extra 5%, so we will increase rates 5%. And if you use the same amount of water this year as you do next year, if consumption was inelastic, you would expect to receive 5% bump in your revenues. But we're seeing that consumption is elastic to some degree. And so instead of seeing that full 5%, you may only see 4%, maybe 4.5% as actual revenue back to you. And so that's, again, going to play in this rate study that we have coming up. So we got to be just cognizant that people are making adjustments and using less water for a variety of reasons, which we'll cover more in a few weeks. Okay. And revenue, again, is not likely to grow significantly due to the fact that we do have some population growth. Not directly as it relates to that. We'll have to figure out revenues from more of a constant consumption standpoint. Planning implications. So one of the things we did right soon as we started working on this, I started looking at the amount of storage that we needed in the system, and we have a couple of different policies out there. One was 800 gallons per connection, another was 600 gallons per ERU. And then we started looking at what the state required, and they suggested a minimum of 200 gallons per ERU. And so that's like 1/3 of what we were using. And then we started looking at the storage requirements, and there was a lot of storage we needed to construct if we were going to stick with that 600 gallons per ERU. And so we started looking at some of these really major events that we've had recently, like a couple of breaks on the transmission line, and where was storage limiting and things like that. And we really kind of came to the conclusion that that 600 gallons per ERU was probably a little too high. We didn't really need that. We'd really done well in those catastrophic events. So we decided internally, and we'll have to bring that to you as a policy change, that we want to reduce that standby storage to basically, if there's a service area that has multiple sources, we want to reduce it to the DOH minimum requirement of 200 gallons per day per ERU. And then for those service areas that have a single source of supply, we'll bump that up by 50%, make it 300 gallons per day per ERU. And that brought a lot of issues with inadequate storage off the table by just doing that. So that was kind of an implication that we've incorporated into this plan. So again, water use efficiency is impacting us in various ways. We'll get much more into that later. And water revenues may be leveling out if our consumption is level. It's, you know, if you're just raising rates to beat inflation, then you're really just inflation adjusted, you're just really having the same rates. So again, when we look at a rate structure, we're gonna have to talk about that. And but the other thing about, you know, the fact that we have reduced demands on the system and reduced growth going forward, a lot of the systems that were planned years ago will have extended lifespans because we won't be reaching their capacities as early as we may have planned. So that gets a whole nother question that we need to think about. Okay, how can we preserve those assets to last not just 10 more years, but maybe 20 to 25 more years? Because if they're not going to get limited on a capacity basis, we just need to get their lifespan a little bit longer. So preserving the assets that we already have is a key part of this planning effort. And then rural growth pressures may strain some of our rural water facilities. And what we've seen with the population distributions, where's the growth occurring? Back in the 80s, you know, the goal of the Growth Management Act was to put like 80% of the growth in the cities and 20% in the rural areas. And they were really successful at that when you look at the 80s in Skagit County. Mount Vernon was growing at 4% and the county was growing at like 1%. And, you know, so they really succeeded. But each subsequent decade after that, the growth rate within the cities has been declining to where now in like Mount Vernon and Burlington, it's par with the county. They're getting about the same growth rate in the county as they are in the cities, in those two cities. The only city that's has any glimpse of growing beyond the others is Cedar Woolley. So that's so what that's doing, what we're seeing is that there is more pressure to develop in the rural areas where we have less infrastructure than we do in the urban areas. And so that's not necessarily on us. A lot of times that's going to be developers wanting to develop in a rural area and being responsible for providing the water infrastructure. It's also going to possibly be groups of people forming LUDs, trying to get water services out to a specific area. So it's not necessarily on us, but we have to be able to plan for that and be able to respond to those requests when they come in. So some of the recommendations, just some major issues in Judy. Again, the water pipeline end of life situation that we're facing. Infrastructure preservation that I've already talked about. Facility expansion. Again, just like I just said, we're converting suburban areas into urban areas and rural areas into suburban areas. Again, this is going to not necessarily fall on the PUD. It's going to fall on developers, possibly property owners through LUDs. This is a graph kind of showing kind of the age of our pipe materials. So you can see down here, these are decades, little decade blocks. Over here is some pipe materials that we have. And then this axis is the linear footage. And just notice right here, these red these red candles right here. That's all the AC pipe that we have. That's sitting out there that was installed during these timeframes between, up to in the 1970s and earlier. So that's what we're really working on right now from a pipe replacement standpoint, is this little block of pipelines right here. But that still represents about 72 miles of pipe. So, but we're working away at it. And then the next block is some of this PVC pipe that was installed in the 70s and 80s. This is not necessarily the PVC pipe that's the C900 class or the C909 class. This is a lower class PVC pipe. Could be just like a 150 pressure class pipe. So not really what you would be considering as acceptable water pipe now. And so that's going to be the next block. But then you can see this really tall spike of ductile iron pipe that was installed in the 1990s. That's what Mark discussed at the last engineering meeting. So that's just a kind of a visual as to how the pipe replacements moving forward here. Satellite systems. We got 6 satellite systems. They are also included in this water system plan. Obviously not to the same degree. The primarily focus is on the Judy Reservoir system. We do talk about them. They are included. Most of their information is in an appendix, but be aware of that. So, but we really don't have a lot of issues with our satellite systems. One of them is that we do need to replace the reverse osmosis plant out of Potlatch. That's currently in the procurement stage. It's a 2024 budgeted item. So that's underway right now. Alger. Alger has a well that was drilled in 1960. It's at the end of its useful life. It doesn't provide the capacity that we have for the water right. We have 100 gallons per minute. It is our water right. It can only pump 60 gallons a minute. We need to go in there, drill a new well, build a new pump house, new treatment system, try to maximize that 100 gallons per minute water right that we have out there. And then up in Marble Mount, again, a bit of a quirky system. It's, it's remote. The pass is closed 6 months out of the year. Populations increase, then the population decrease. Business gets come in, businesses go out of business. Sometimes we think, okay, growth is occurring, then no, growth is not occurring. The system was designed with 2 storage tanks, but only 1 storage tank was built. So we are just going to keep an eye on this. We may have to build that second storage tank if development does start to pick back up there, and it would have to be probably some businesses opening, things like that. So just those are the 3 things that really are noteworthy with our satellite systems. Financial overview. So just some conditions. So we put together obviously a new capital improvement program for the water system plan. It does go out to 2046. That is the end of our MOA. It's about 22 years out. But the first 10 years is really the planning horizon, but health wants you to plan out 20 plus years. So we chose 2046. It was the end of the MOA. What we have is approximately in the budget that you'll see in here, about $100 million over the next 10 years. That's pretty much on par with what you've been seeing year after year from a budgeting standpoint. Is we propose a capital improvement plan of about $100 million over a 10-year period. So we've kind of stuck with that for now. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we aren't reaching capacities at things like Judy Reservoir and stuff like that. So, but the other emphasis was on preservation of existing assets. So we do have in there about 22 million in water system O&M over the next 10 years. A lot of this is reservoir painting, things along that nature to try to preserve the infrastructure that we already have. So implementation strategy. So first off is we're going to give you draft copies of the water system plan as it is now. some things are gonna be blank. We gotta do, we gotta send them out to other local agencies. They gotta give us their reports on consistencies and stuff like that. So there was actually a couple sections that aren't actually written yet because we don't have the information to write them yet. Some of the appendices may be a little lacking, but for the bulk of it, it's there for you to review and stuff. So what we propose is in 2 weeks, we'll come back to have the commission meeting and have just a question and answer session. So that'll give you an opportunity to review the document, have questions, concerns. We'll get all the different, try to get all the different subject matter experts here that wrote their various sections, so in case you have questions specifically for them. And that will just be an opportunity to really dig into the plan from a question and answer standpoint. After that, we're going to prepare the draft copies that we send to the local agencies, the county, the major cities, the tribes, other planning agencies. And that'll be to start that consistency review. We'll also send copies to the Department of Health and Ecology. Now, the ecology is just going to primarily review the water rights, make sure that what we believe our water rights are, what they concur with us. So it's a little bit of a concurrence there. Department of Health will obviously review the whole water system plan based on the WAC. Are we addressing all the things that we're required to address to their satisfaction? We're also going to publish a SEPA determination of non-significance that has a period. It has to be advertised. There's like a 14-day period, comment period. This is our notice to the public that we have the water system plan. They can come in and look at it. They can make comments on it as well. And then we have to facilitate this water use efficiency goal setting public forum. And we propose to do that at the June 25th commission meeting. And at that point, I or somebody will prepare another presentation that will just really focus on this water use efficiency, how it's impacting us, and how we're addressing it within the water system plan. So with that, I am done. Any questions right off the bat?
Yeah, one of my questions, I mean, since this is something that happens only once every 10 years, starting now, no amendments, right? Was wondering if this would be something that's more workshop oriented versus just general business meeting on one of our off meetings. I don't know if you guys have any input on that. Because I will want to read through the whole thing in a couple weeks. If I could have one more week would be awesome. But
Can we tackle that at the Q&A? Just to see what subject matters are worthy of a workshop and what aren't.
Okay.
I'm just kind of thinking like, there's just small areas. I think the capital plan is probably a workshop.
yeah,
The water use efficiency may be a workshop because it deals with rates a little bit.
Just to add one comment, just to acknowledge the fact that the capital plan is ahead of our budgeting. So that all still has to get vetted through our budgeting process. So take that with a planning hat on to say, okay, this is what's,
We could do a workshop on the capital plan and then cover any other, items. Yeah.
like follow up to the Q&A or
Yeah.
pre-up to, and then.
And I think we have time too. I mean, we got this all can all go in parallel with consistent reviews by local agencies.
Okay.
The forum, is clear till the end of June. It could be before that, even after that. And then Department of Health could take months to actually review. So we could have, we could be talking about this in 2025.
I
Well,
was just gonna say health preparedness for a 3-year.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
that's what they say.
3 year out of the 10.
Yeah, they told us you have to look out 20 years. You should probably look out a couple more.
Oh, okay.
Because you don't want to have them approve it in 3 years or 2 years and have to come back and say, well, you got to plan one more year out because it's not 20 years anymore. So
Yeah, I think my biggest concern, I just don't want to rush through going through the information.
Oh, I agree.
Because there's
It's a year and a half.
lot.
We're not fully expecting you to digest it in 2 weeks.
And so that was my only concern.
Yeah, that June 11th meeting is in 2 weeks. Maybe you want to bring up your item now
Yeah,
because it might impact the schedule.
Right, so I'm planning on going to Anaheim for the ACE Water Conference. We have
Okay.
a Commission meeting that week. George is also gonna be at the conference.
So maybe we just
So
don't have that
table that
meeting.
Not to submarine
Yep.
your schedule, but if you have room in it, maybe we just push it out just because of that.
Yeah.
28th would be the initial instead of the.
That buys some more time to
We can go to the
review.
25th,
Fifth.
or do we want to do the workshop the week before?
Go right to it.
On the
Do a Q&A at a workshop on the
18th.
whatever, 18th?
Yeah, if that works, because then it keeps us, I mean, if you're back. Because then we can start talking about this, and then we can have our meeting
Yeah,
and still stay on your guys' schedule with having the open forum for the usage conversation being that week after. And then if we need to have a follow-up workshop or what have you, we can. I don't know. Does that work?
Yeah.
yeah, I think that.
We're not making, the Q and A is not to make decisions, it's just to go through and respond to questions and all that.
Yeah, we wanted to just give an advance copy to get a start, first before we give it to other people.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I just, with that kind of works out well then,
Yeah,
or not.
so we could do, what I'm hearing is the workshop on the 18th. 18th, we come to the 25th meeting, still do the water use efficiency presentation, and then you can still have a Q&A on anything that's left over from the workshop.
That works great.
Oh, is it? I'm so smart.
Meeting offsite.
Those strategic planning meetings I was telling you about in my manager's report
Oh,
is on
yes.
the 18th.
Okay,
We
never
planned it for the
mind.
off weeks in June, so that we
There
can
you
listen to the
go.
meeting. You don't have to do it on the Tuesday, you can do a work session. We can do a work session on a different day.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I'm open that whole week, it seems.
We could find another day that week.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could do it on the Wednesday or Thursday.
I have no preference.
19th or 20th, you guys are open, okay. Let's go for the 19th, the Wednesday.
Wednesday.
What?
Oh, yeah, so never mind. So the
Coming up on roadblocks. Oh, yeah,
Do
the-
it in September.
great plan.
sounds like the 20th.
Yeah.
Okay, do the
Oh,
20th.
We could do the water use efficiency on the 25th and you can still just hold your questions and you probably generate additional questions with that additional presentation.
And then do something as a follow-up.
In July, or
Could we do
Yeah.
July 2nd? I know there's a 4th of
Ooh.
July coming in there. That's
Or
a
that we do-
Thursday.
Second's bad for me.
we could do it at the second or the first, the 11th, the 11th, the regular meeting in July.
Yeah, why don't we just do that?
That'll be the Q&A in July.
Yeah.
That will give us plenty of time to
Yeah, nice.
dissect this information, the information you present at the usage. I like that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
The 25th, the water use efficiency Q and A moves to July 9th. Is that what you said?
11. 9.
Night.
Oh,
That's Tuesday.
yes.
So the Q and A is moving to the 9th?
Is that what he said?
Q&A is moving.
Regular meeting.
What about a work session?
I don't
As
think we're,
needed.
yeah, we'll, if we need one, we can
We'll
add that.
dial in on what.
Yeah,
And you can call.
yeah, I might. I just know the next couple weekends I'm gonna be out of town and I
Yeah.
will have a lot less time to look over
Okay,
this.
well,
so I'm-
That definitely gives
Yeah.
more time.
Yeah, all those questions come up that way. Or you.
So was there a agreement to cancel the June 11th
Oh,
meeting?
I so moved that we cancel the June
Oh,
11th
that's where you were
meeting.
going with that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Motion in a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, okay. So with that, there's a couple of informational items in there.
Thank you, Mark.
Any commissioner comments tonight?
I just want to thank everyone, Brian, for looking into water adjustment, leak adjustment, coming up with different ideas. I know that not one size fits all. And thank you also, Mark, for presenting on that. I'm in the middle of doing a sewer comp plan and getting all the data together for that, for HDR, so, and for the Anacortes, so it's the year of plans, so I know how much work goes into this.
Anything? All right, so with that, we will adjourn at 6:39 PM.